Hello Stampers, my name is Anna-Karin Evaldsson and I am happy to be here today at Splitcoaststampers for a fun stamping tutorial. We're going to use vellum, and vellum happens to be one of my favorite surfaces. There's just something with its translucent quality that I find very nice, and it's fun to do techniques on. So what you'll need for this tutorial is some vellum and some old book paper, or you could use printed paper, and then just some colored cardstock. I also used some holographic paper by Simon Says Stamp for die cutting. You can use almost any type of stamp for this. I used the circle pattern background by Simon Says Stamp, and you'll also need some embossing ink and white embossing powder. You will also need some colored pencils, and I used Faber-Castell's Polychromos pencils, but you can try other brands too, it doesn't matter. You also need a foam pad to work on, and embossing tools with the little ball tips. I embellished my card using the Simon Says Stamp U Matter and Leafy Branch dies. And you will also need 2 colors of distress ink and ink blending tools. So we're going to do both heat and dry embossing on this project, and you'll start by heat embossing the background stamp on vellum with white powder. Since vellum is translucent, you can color on both sides, and here I'm coloring at the front, and then turn it around, you can color it at the back too. You will notice a small difference, so it will look a little brighter. The colors will look a little brighter when you color on the front. And for this project we are going to color on the front. So just take your pencils and you start coloring inside the embossed circles. This doesn't need to be perfect. Just go over the circles and be a little careful so that you don't rub off the embossing powder. I don't know if you can see it, but my pencils are not super sharp for this, since a very sharp pencil might damage the embossing powder. I'm going to speed this up. I used a bunch of different shades of green, but you could also use just the same color for all the dots. The variation makes for an interesting background. And I also left some of the dots uncolored. I actually usually color on the back when using vellum together with colored pencils, since it gives something of a smoother look, I think. But here we need to color on the front because we're going to dry emboss those dots. Now when you dry emboss vellum, it looks white, so that means if we colored on the back and then dried embossed from the back, the white color that the vellum takes on, it sort of hides the colored pencil shades almost completely. So when I just tested out this technique, I realized it's better to color on the front, because then you still get those bright colors from the pencils. So I finished coloring this off camera. It looks nice, doesn't it, with all those green dots. You could also try using contrasting colors for a different effect. And then you can use the embossing tool and burnish the dots. This is not necessary, but it makes them shiny in a pretty nice way. If you do it, you'll see the difference. But if you're in a hurry, you can also skip this step, and you're not going to notice it that much. So now you'll turn the paper around, and we're going to start dry embossing it, working on top of a foam pad. You can use any type of foam pad. It's good if it's a bit thicker and sturdier than, for instance, an ordinary mouse pad. So you'll just use the embossing tool. I used a medium-sized one here, and start dry embossing. Don't press too hard, because then you can break the vellum, but if you do, don't worry, you could just cover it up with a sequin or something, or it might not even show. So just work one dot at a time. Doesn't need to be perfect. This takes a little while, but it's well worth the effort. I'm speeding this up a little bit. You could also try using other background stamps with different patterns to see what effects you can get. And then you can go in with a smaller embossing tool and just add some detail there where you might have missed a few spots. And there we're done. And you can see that the dots that weren't colored, they're now whites. And the colored dots, they have this white background. It's almost like a white texture that comes through. It's difficult to capture on the photo, but the dots are embossed, so if you touch them you can feel that they are embossed. To finish the card, you can test what your vellum piece will look like on top of different colors and different surfaces. As you can see, it doesn't lie flat, which is also why I stitched it to my background. But stitching is a good way of attaching vellum, also because it's not visible, since you don't want to see any glue or tape or anything through the vellum. And as you can see, it gets a different look depending on the surface you put it on. I like the old book paper the best, but you might prefer something else. Just try out different colors. So to finish the card, I die cut the You Matter sentiment and then inked it with distress inks. I used cracked pistachio and pine needles, since they coordinated nicely with the colored pencils shades that I had used. I aimed for a graduated look with a lighter color at the top, and then the sentiment gets darker towards the bottom. Pine needles is a nice shade of distress ink that I don't use often enough. Every time I use it, I think it's a really nice sort of bluish shade of green. And finally I used the light colored again, just to blend the two of them together. And that's it. The You Matter die comes with a mat that you can mount it on like this. To finish the card, I also die cut 3 leafy branches from white holographic and colored cardstock. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and you can also find more inspiration at my blog Layers of Ink. Happy stamping! Bye!